Hey everyone, I hope you're doing really well. My name is Miranda. Today I'm going to be talking to you about all the books that I have read since I did my last reading wrap up, which was the beginning of October. So we're going to go through 4 months worth of books, but luckily it's not that many because I didn't read that many books in all of that period of time, so we don't have a load to get through. I don't have strong feelings towards any of these books. I just wanted to talk about them for a little bit and make sure that everything is up to date, so then hopefully moving forward I can start doing monthly wrap-ups again. Although we'll see what happens. We'll see how much I read, how I'm feeling, all that kind of good stuff. So we'll start off with all the books that I read way back in October last year, and the first one of those is The Sister Who Ate Her Brothers by Chen Campbell. So this was a kind of collection of creepy stories, kind of written for children but also very much like enjoyable by adults as well. And yeah, it's a really beautiful book. It's illustrated. I don't have it with me right now, but it's really lovely. And I really enjoyed this. I wasn't like hugely blown away by any of the stories. I mean, they were fun. I enjoyed it. It's not like my favourite thing I've ever read, which is basically going to be the theme for this video. So I'm sorry about that. Then I read I'm Thinking of Ending Things by Reid. So I listened to this on audio, and it was interesting. Basically, it's about a like a man and a woman in a relationship. They're in a car journey to go and see, I think, the guy's parents, so they're going to stay with his parents. Oh, and yeah, and it's the woman narrating, and she's kind of having thoughts of like ending the relationship basically, and from there it just gets weird. I enjoyed this. I think the atmosphere building was really good. It's so slow, like how it builds up, which was really fun for me to read. I liked that a lot, and it was definitely like creepy, and I was thinking like there's lots of wrong stuff going on here, but it was quite like, I think it maybe took a little bit too long for me, because like it sort of felt like, you know, the tension was like here, kind of gradually going up, very gradually, and then suddenly it went just like everything happened all at once at the very end, and that kind of caught me off guard, and I then had to like re-listen to it and figure out what the hell was going on, and like read loads of stuff online to figure out what had actually happened. But it's a really interesting book, and I think I would quite like to reread it at some point, because like there's a lot of stuff going on, and the ending is really emotional, actually, and I thought it was really kind of effective. It wasn't effective the first time around because I didn't know what was going on, and I was like, I don't know what's happening here, but on audio especially, the ending is done really well, and the whole narration is done really well, so it's a great audiobook. Would recommend if you're in the mood for something creepy. Then I tried to read and DNF'd Chronicles from the Land of the Happiest People on Earth by Wole Soyinka, and I actually got this on NetGalley, but I think I got about a couple of chapters in. It's quite long, and I couldn't get on with it. I got it because I read where is it? Death and the King's Horseman by Wole Soyinka last year for uni, and it's really interesting. He's like a very interesting kind of Nigerian writer, and this was his new book. Like he hadn't published a book for like 30 years or something, and it was like quite a big deal, and I was very excited that I got an arc of it, but then I just found it completely unreadable. Like when I read about the synopsis of this book, it sounds so good. Like it tells the multi-dimensional story of a secret society dealing in human parts for sacrificial uses, whose members encompass the highest political and religious figures in the land. It details how this conspiracy and cover-up of this quasi-organisation affect not only the life of the nation, but more specifically the lives of 4 friends. It's a novel that explodes criminal racketeering of a most sinister and deadly kind that's operating in an African nation uncomfortably like Nigeria. So it sounds great, it sounds really interesting, but I just couldn't get into it. It was taking me like forever to read. I think it's really dense. Like every sentence, there's just so many words and ideas in it, and I was just not in the right place for reading it. And I had no idea what was going on most of the time. So next I read The Silence of the Girls by Pat Barker. Now, if you have a really excellent memory, you might remember that I took this book off my TBR a while ago, deciding that it wasn't my thing and I probably wouldn't ever get around to it. Well, I did a module about Greek myth retellings at uni, which was really interesting, and I had to read this as one of the set texts, that's what they're called, and I actually really loved it. Basically, The Silence of the Girls is a retelling of the Iliad, except primarily from the perspective of Briseis, and who is one of the women in, like, she's a prisoner of war, essentially, and a slave. And most of the criticism that I had seen of this book was that it is not just from Briseis' perspective, it also switches in the kind of last third to be partly from the perspective of Achilles, who is the man who has enslaved Briseis and killed all her family. So I can understand why theoretically people would have a problem with that, but I think that in the context of this book, it really, really works. Basically, I think that what Pat Barker was trying to do with this book was make the people in the Iliad into real fleshed out characters, and that includes obviously Briseis and all the women who were in the camp with her, but also Achilles, because he is a terrible, violent, angry human being. By having him as a narrator, it makes him a person, not just like this faceless monster, which I think makes the whole thing a lot more effective. It's all very like visceral, and kind of the horrors of war are written about very like realistically. The purpose of it all is to try and bring this ancient story into like a modern reader's like world, and part of that is done by making the characters real people and making them feel like people that you could encounter, rather than kind of legends or sort of one-dimensional monsters. Anyway, it's not a perfect book, but I did really enjoy it a lot more than I thought I would. So yeah, that was that one. Then I read The Flower Girls by Alice Clark-Platts, which is a thriller that I've had on my shelves for a while because I got it for free when I worked in a bookshop, and it was fine. I listened to the audiobook of it, and yeah, it was basically fine. Essentially, it's about these two sisters who, when they are very, very young, kill another child, and one of them goes to prison, and one of them the younger one gets a new name and a whole new identity, and it kind of opens with her at a hotel, and another child going missing while she's there, and she's kind of paranoid that everyone will find out about her secret identity as one of these like infamous murderers, and think that it's her who's taken the child. So again, this was one that was like interesting. I enjoyed it at the time. I was like, you know, good. It was good escapism, and the story was interesting and kept me engaged. But I was quite disappointed by the ending. It was fine. It was literally just fine. I listened to it. There you go. Then I read The Hval by Sarah Moss, which I also had an arc for from NetGalley, and I did finish it. So I'm very happy I got an arc of this because I love Ghost Wall, I loved Summerwater, and both by Sarah Moss. And this is kind of, I think The Hval is a sort of is almost like a continuation of those two books, and they almost feel like a little trilogy, which does mean that the writing style and the themes often feel quite repetitive. So if you've read either of those two and you want something from Sarah Moss that is totally different and new, then The Fell is not that, really. It's kind of an extension of those books. Basically, it's set in the kind of, I'd say like the early-ish days of the like COVID lockdown in the UK. But it's a very weird setting because it's at the point where people all know what the virus is and like what's happening, and they've kind of got used to stuff, but also it's all still very new and raw. And that was a really interesting part of it that was explored. And obviously this is all like really recent, so it was bizarre. But basically it's about a woman who decides to, even though she and her son have COVID, well, she decides that she wants to go out on a walk on the fells when she's not supposed to, and go out for like a big long walk on her own, and thinks, oh, it's fine, I'm not going to see anybody, I'm not going to get caught, even though she's meant to stay inside her house because she has COVID. And it follows lots of different perspectives. So it follows her perspective, her son, like various people kind of in houses surrounding them. So if you read Summerwater, it's kind of that similar, like different perspectives, telling a kind of small moment in a community type thing. What I found really weird about this book is that it feels like way too close to reality, but also really far away from it. It's very bizarre because obviously, like, we're still living through the and like it's very odd because it's writing, like, the book is about things that feel very specific to, like, I don't know, 18 months ago, and almost feel like, I don't know, it feels very like in the past because things are very different now and people talk about things very differently now, but it also feels like disturbingly current, and I found that really bizarre, like a mix of things to read about. Not necessarily bad, just weird feeling. Generally, I think the characters weren't done quite as well as either of her previous two books, which I enjoy both of those more than this one, but I think she really does nail some certain parts of, like, living in this contemporary moment, God, I hate it, that I've never thought of before. Like, the way that people kind of think about life and death in a very kind of casual way, and the fact that, life and death are like constant parts of, I'm gonna sneeze, as I was saying, the way that life and death are like part of everyone's everyday very suddenly, and it's like, you kind of have to become attuned to the fact that, like, there are millions of people dying every day, and that kind of just becomes normal, and that's kind of like a theme that I thought was really, really interesting and I hadn't considered before. And it's basically about, like, the feeling of waiting, and doing, like, continuing to do everyday things while, like, terrible cataclysmic things are happening, like, outside of you, which is, so I feel like it's a book about climate change as well as being about the Pan-Ed. All the characters are just stuck waiting, doing little small things while terrible things happen around them that they can't control. Next is A Room of One's Own by Virginia Woolf, which I also read for uni. I talked about it in my Best Books of the Year video, which was my last video, so I'm not going to talk about it much here. Basically, it's really interesting, and really cool. I wrote an essay on it. My favourite thing about it is that the way that she writes about, like, the fact that she doesn't have all the answers, and the fact that she doesn't necessarily know what her conclusions are, but like leaves it up to the reader to kind of decide what they want to take from her argument, instead of being like, this is my gospel that you must believe. I really appreciated that, and I thought that was a really interesting way of like writing a kind of theoretical essay about feminism. Anyway, moving on, I read Sitting Pretty by Rebekah Taussig. I listened to this on audiobook again. Audiobooks have been like my lifeline in the last few months, and this is great. So this is a memoir, and it's basically about Rebekah's life living as a disabled woman. So this was really interesting, really funny, and like warm memoir that kind of like invited you in. I mean, she talks about like sort of academic disability studies, which is something I've never come across before, but I thought was really interesting. And also the idea that like disability is something that will pretty much affect everybody in the world at some point in their life, which is something I've never thought of before. Like, there were so many times where I was reading this book where I was like, how has this never occurred to me? And yeah, it's really interesting, and a great place to start if you haven't really read much about disability before. It was really, really good. I would really highly recommend it. Then, another audiobook, Plain Bad Heroines by Emily M. Danforth. This is about, well, it's about a lot of things. So basically it's about this school in like New England, I think. It's a girls' school where at the kind of beginning of the like 1910s, probably, lots of the girls, like, well, several of the girls die in unexplained, not necessarily unexplained, but like creepy ways, basically. It opens with one of the girls running away from her male cousin and into the woods, and she disrupts a nest of yellow jackets and gets stung to death. There are two narratives. There's the one in the kind of historical setting, which follows the girls at school and the teachers, and then there's also a kind of modern setting where there are three women involved in making a film about this story. This book is really long and really slow, and I think it was too long and too slow. Even though, again, I enjoyed all of the process of listening to the audiobook, it's always like I get to the end of these kinds of books and I'm like, that didn't really go where I wanted it to, or not necessarily where I wanted it to, but like it didn't kind of, I don't feel like at the end I'm like, it's all been wrapped up and I've like read a kind of satisfying thing that's been building. Like they never quite kind of round off properly. There's lots of build up, lots of interesting creepy stuff happening, you know, like curses, ghosts, big old towers, you know, like a whole load of stuff, loads of creepy things, but it never really felt like it arrived where it was going. It's got a really interesting narrator and narrative style, which I really enjoyed. The characters are pretty well fleshed out. Again, it's one that I enjoyed. I'm not going to be like shouting about it from the rooftops, but it was fun. And if you are into a kind of like, I don't know, if you're looking for like a sapphic, dark academia, like ghosts, creepiness, possible curses vibe, and you don't mind reading a book that's like 600 pages, why not? Sure, go for it. Like, it's fun. I really enjoyed the process of reading it. We're on the final straight here, people. Okay, so then I read The Anthropocene Reviewed by John Green. So I love the podcast of which this book is based on. It's essentially a collection of essays, very, very short essays that are styled in as reviews of kind of different aspects of the human-centered planet. That's how John Green says it on the podcast. And I've loved this podcast for a while because it's very meditative, it's very like thoughtful, and it's, yeah, just really interesting tiny stories. So some of the reviews are like Canada geese, scratch and sniff stickers, teddy bears, the act of googling strangers. That's one of my favourite ones. This is one that I read physically, and it's one that I do wish I had listened to on audio, because like I said, I love the podcast and I love how like slow and meditative it is, and I didn't realise how short in writing a lot of the podcasts, like a lot of the essays are, until I was reading them, and I was like, oh, that's like a 20-minute podcast, but it's only like, you know, 3.5 pages or something. So I felt like I was kind of rushing through them, not deliberately, just because that's like the speed that I read at, and it didn't have the same kind of feeling that the podcast did for me. It's obviously my own fault, because that's how I was reading it as opposed to listening to it, and it's obviously not the same experience, but I think this is one that would benefit from being listened to. That being said, like I love John and Hank's videos, I love like their podcasts, and it felt kind of very familiar and like comforting to me, and there are loads of interesting like stories and thoughts in it, and I did really enjoy it. Then my last book of 2021 was Land of Big Numbers by Tipping Chen, which I did listen to on audio. This is a short story collection about basically lots of different stories about people in China. This is another one that doesn't really stick with me, sadly. I enjoyed it while I was listening to it, but it doesn't really like, it never kind of grabbed me or like sucked me in a way that I was like, I really, really cared about what was going on. I think my favourite story was the last one, which is about a group of people who get stuck on an underground train like platform, because people keep saying that the next train will be delayed. They don't know how long for. It ends up that they're down there for like months, and they're not allowed to leave. They have to just wait for this train, and it said, you know, everyone keeps telling them that it'll come eventually, and they kind of build like this community down there, and that one was really, really effective and fantastic. The other ones I do not remember very well at all. So yeah, I think it's again, it's good. Doesn't really stick with me, but if it sounds like something interesting to you, go for it. Okay, last two books. The two books that I read in January. One of them, well, the first book I read in this year is Entangled Life by Merlin Sheldrake. Again, another audiobook. This I literally just listened to because I was like, I want to be lulled to sleep by a kind of posh sounding man talking to me about mushrooms, and that is exactly what this is. It's perfect, it's beautiful. I was like, I don't want to think about the world, I just want to think about funguses. I understood very little of what he was actually talking about in this book, partly because I kept zoning out, and like because it was so relaxing and the kind of scientific stuff just went straight over my head. So because I wasn't like engaged entirely in my brain, like I was kind of trying to relax, and then my brain was just like, just let the mushroomy talk wash over you. And that was lovely. Like, it was a lovely experience. I can't tell you anything I learned from it, but I did enjoy the experience of listening to the audiobook, and that's what matters. So yeah, is it a good book? Yes. Is it interesting? Yes. Is it perfect for going to sleep to or just listening to on your way to work and not really paying that much attention to? Yes, it's wonderful. And lastly, I have been filming for 40 minutes somehow. I thought this was going to be a quick video. Lastly, I read Girls Against God by Jenny Hval, which is translated from Norwegian by Marjam Idriss. This is a really weird book. I came across it completely randomly, and I thought, well, the description that I heard was like, witches, weirdness, magic, Edvard Munch. I don't know. I read the description, thought it sounded really cool, and I was like, I'm gonna read this. It's on Scribd as an ebook. I'll read it. Why not? It's very weird. So this book is basically like a genreless, plotless, almost characterless, not really novel. It follows a woman who is trying to make an avant-garde film, but basically it's like a load of thoughts and kind of ideas all kind of squished together. It kind of read like a long extended like poem. I don't know. And again, I was just not in the right headspace for this. And there were bits that I was definitely like, this is amazing, this is so interesting. Like she talks about hatred a lot, and a lot about like music, and kind of connections between people. And I thought it was all like interesting stuff. A lot of it I just went over my head. I'm glad I, powered through, but it just wasn't my kind of thing. So the reason I didn't read that much in January was because I was also reading this baby, which is freaking huge. So I'm just over halfway through now, which means I have 400 pages to go. Yay. And yeah, Books of Jacob, read along with all my friends. It's a good time, but also terrifying. So that's why I haven't got that much reading done. Also, I just haven't, and that's okay. Now we're caught up. Who knows, again, what will happen in the next few months. Second semester of final year of uni has just started, so that's interesting. We'll see how that goes. Ooh, okay. But I am going to have to read lots of interesting books in the next few months for one of my modules, so I'll keep you updated on that. And I will probably see you soon for your next monthly video, because that's how they're going at the moment. Hopefully it'll be sooner. Who knows? Let me know if you want to see anything specific, because I have some ideas that I'm planning on doing soon, but also nice to hear from you what you want to see, or if you have any ideas, let me know. I don't know. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. I will see you very soon.